Around 5 a.m., got to the bathroom seizing on the floor, vomiting, shitting all at the same time as my body rejects it. This started happening at about 15 years old as my mother was giving me drugs I didn't need. The doctors even told my family and other medical professionals that all I needed was a glass of milk in the morning with my pills to coat my stomach. Now I'm 31 and it's worse than ever. I guess coating my stomach with milk from age 15 to 24 because the doctors wanted to listen to my mother's false reports and overload me with pills. And my mother wanted to give me pills I wasn't prescribed. And my mother wanted to lie and manipulate doctors to try to avoid her responsibilities, so as my father still does. Every time my father has any responsibility, like if I mention I'm sick and that my mother poisoned me with pills, my father will come up with a fantasy. I don't know which one. Oh, here's a good one he might come up with. Uh, oh, I'm a homicidal maniac and I'm out to get everybody. That's one my mother used to love when I was 7. Oh, my 7-year-old's putting his name on the swimming medal, so that means he's out to get me. Meanwhile, I just won a medal in an orphanage. That's it. And so, what would be a nice, good fantasy that my father might spread today? Oh, let's see. He let his wife pass away, and as she went through liver failure, she was drinking alcohol right in front of him and me with only 20% of her liver working. That contributed to her death. She also was popping her son's pill. And, oh God, I'm seizing pretty bad. I can't even talk. And so I brought this to my father and said, Mom is taking my Vicodin and my pills. Can you do something about this? So my father goes upstairs. My mother says it's only one time. And then my father and mother proceed to yell at me and punish me for trying to help my mother with her illness. Now, after all this, of course, my mother ends up having some problems with her liver failure. She's drinking and pilling as her liver fails. So she's having some problems in the emergency room, and the doctors obviously see the alcohol in her blood because it's only been 10 hours since she drank, and now she's back in the emergency room. But my father thinks he can hide this drinking from the doctor, so he leaves it out. Now, years have passed. I've suffered. I've had seizures, injuries, all because of this. I was the only supportive person in the funeral. My father wouldn't even let me visit when I wanted to help my mother in the hospital. I wanted to help the doctors, help my mother. I wanted to say goodbye to my mother, but my father made sure I wasn't even allowed to visit my mother. Not only that, my father did all this crazy stuff that could put his wife and son in danger, actually. So now, 11 years later, I'm mentioning my health is failing. So what could my father turn all this into? My son has a problem. That's why we had him on all these pills, and that's why we made up all these stories. And then what is he going to say about his wife passing away from pills and alcohol? Oh, he'll probably blame that on me too. Now that I'm asking my father to take responsibility, 11, 12 years after his wife has passed away, deceased. How much you want to bet he starts making up fantasies? Oh, my son murdered my wife. Like a fucking crazy, elderly, senile old man. Obviously, if I had anything to do with it, my father would have mentioned it to the doctors as it happened. But see, now I'm asking my father to help me not die from what's going on. First, my mother passes away from drugs and alcohol and all this pill popping madness that she's forcing me to do with her and all this craziness. And now that I'm going to die from it next, my father's probably going to blame all his problems. No, my son's a homicidal maniac. I bet my son murdered my wife. Yes. Yeah, my son's a drug addict. I bet my son sells drugs. Yeah. And I'm like, Dad, I've never sold a drug in my life. I've never been a drug dealer. I never could make any money like that. If everybody in the homeless community knew me as the kid who doesn't sell, buy drugs, you can't get Zach to sell or buy drugs. He'll give you a name. That's it. Go see Bobby. That's it. That's the best you'll get out of Zach. And this was when I was in my early 20s and drugs were everywhere. So obviously I have nothing to do. And I'm not people have beat me, almost murdered me, and I haven't defended myself. I mean, literally, there are situations where I should be using the weapons I have on me to keep myself from dying because somebody's trying to rob me, steal me, or beat me. But because I have such a devotion to not hurting other people, even if they're hurting me, something to do with my religion, I don't. But my father, anytime my father has to take responsibility for his actions, he then blames the little orphan son he adopted for all his problems. So I'm saying I'm sick from his and his wife's actions from 2011 all the way to before when I was 5. And I don't like the fact they trafficked me and tried to bury it in multiple states. So I'm bringing this up with arms open. I'm listening to Priest. I told Priest what my father and mother did to me. What can I do about it? They said I should try to be nice and confront my father and see if he wants to clean up his mess finally. And I've been very nice about it. And the more I bring this to my father nicely, the more fantasies he tries to spin and put in my face. You burnt down my houses. When? Show me a house I burnt down. Well, there isn't one. But my wife told me you were trying to. So your crazy ass, mentally ill wife, who's now passed away, who was popping pills and drinking, told you that the little 5-year-old boy was burning your house down? Yes, and I believe it. And what was really going on was the kid just saw a book of matches and he wanted to see if he could make them work. There was no burnt property. The matches didn't even get lit. He couldn't even figure out how to light the match. So how does that mean he's burning down your house? Well, my wife said he could have burned down the house, so he's trying to burn down the house, so he is trying to burn down the house, so he's mentally ill and he needs to be medicated. Dad, do you see how that might be harming a child? Did you do this to your grandson? When your grandson stole a lighter or took a book of matches and tried to light the lighter someplace, did you do this to them as well? Would you suggest this treatment to your grandson when he takes a box of matches to his closet to see if he can figure out how they light? And then somebody like his uncle loses his mind and says, no, 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 he could have tried to burn the house down. He could have burned the house down. So, yes, your grandson is trying to burn your son's house down. No, my father has never made that statement about his grandson for the exact same circumstances. But whenever he has to take responsibility for his own actions with his own son, Zachary has to suffer. He has to seize. He has to be sick to his stomach year after year in the mornings. He has to be brought to Texas, then brought to New Mexico, then brought to Maine and miss out on 4 years of education. He has to be cut off from doctors. He has to have stories made up about him at psychiatry offices. Yes, the mother will rant so many fantasies that this kid is sick as can be on pills. Don't forget this pill, like the mother is giving this child pills that he's not prescribed, that's interfering with his kid's emotional state. Like one of the ones in question happened to be womanly meds. So that's menopause meds for women in their 50s. And yet my mother was tossing me meds from her cabinet. Do you know what the emotional state of your 13, 14-year-old son might be? Or even your 10-year-old son if your mother decides to slip you opiates, downers, and random pills to make you look sick? Do you have any clue what that could be doing to your child's emotional state and what his behaviors might be? I'll tell you what this way. If I did something like my mother did to me, to one of my sons, if I had a son or a daughter, and I treated my son or daughter the way my mother and father treated me, I would expect my son or daughter, when they grow up, to murder me. Yes. If I tried to destroy my son's health for money or for attention, if I start slipping him pills, if I lie about my son at a doctor to get money from Social Security, if I try to pay my bills with my son in some way, and then I leave him to other people, and if I drug him and if he's having seizures on the floor, and if I bring him to Texas and leave him in a mountain for 18 months, and then bad shit happens there, but then I move him to Maine, and I don't even let him get an education, I homeschool him, and then I let my wife pill him up some more. If I treated my son abusively with drugs, medications, and doctors, if I was twisting his mind, I would expect to have some real fucked up problems, and I would be scared because of my own actions. But I would never do that. See, what I would do is I would take responsibility if I made a mistake, bring the kid to the real doctors, and I would do everything to save my son's life because I want him to have a good life. And if I made some mistake where some other human being out there is seizing in the morning, vomiting, or if I saw my son sick at 15 years old, asking for a glass of milk every morning because he feels like his stomach hurts, and if I heard my son talk about an extra epicac punishment and him having acid reflux and stomach issues, and if my son looked like he was going to starve to death, and if he looked like Skeletor at the age of 7, 8, 9, 10, if it looked like this kid was getting abused on a regular basis, and my mother or wife seemed like they were also doing something crazy, you better believe I would step in.